All right, Ryan, 3 weeks ago, when our Olympic medalists all came back from Tokyo, the three boxers who had won medals, among the things they've been talking about is their plea to colleges here in the Philippines to bring back boxing. You know, in the up to the 60s or so, there was boxing in the NCAA. Our old dear friend Joe Cantada was, in fact, an NCAA champion himself. But there's always been some resistance. You know, every so often somebody dies by accident. What is the status of boxing in schools in the U.S.?
It doesn't exist. I mean, you can't even play dodgeball in America anymore because it's, they view it as, schools view it as exclusionary. How much more so would it be you're punching people in the face? So we're at a point now where like I couldn't even imagine it. I know that had been a thing many generations ago, but I couldn't see this generation doing that.
All right, so there's actually how do people get started in amateur boxing in the U.S.? It's not through the school system.
No, it's not through the school system. It's usually like I want to say police athletic leagues are great. It's a great way for police to offer something, to younger people in the communities. They have boxing gyms. They run boxing programs. I always say that you don't choose boxing. Boxing chooses you. It's the circumstances in your life. A lot of children, they can't get along in team sports situations. And the only way that they can connect with, like, say, a positive male role model a lot of times is through a boxing trainer. So that, in my case, that's how I got involved in boxing when I was like 14, 15 years old. Like I was a juvenile delinquent, and like the only place I could go that was positive in my neighborhood was a boxing gym. So it's usually in those kinds of circumstances, but you won't see it really pushed in schools, not like in some other countries that they have.
Yeah, here in the Philippines, in 2007, Senator Lito Lapid then pushed a bill called Senate Bill 60, which was set to establish a Philippine Boxing Academy, which was supposed to be run by the Games and Amusement Sport, but that never pushed through. And then there was this big furor over the 16-year-old kid. I believe it was in Tarlac. He died after a bout. And all of a sudden, there was another call for them to ban boxing in schools, because in the UAAP and NCAA schools, there's no boxing. But other smaller school leagues in the provinces in particular, they have their own boxing tournaments. And, there, I guess the parents are more relaxed about it. And because, it may be eventually a way for them to make some money and get out of poverty.
Now, I always wondered how that would work, because when you think of boxers, you don't think of students going to Ateneo or La Salle. And, I always wondered how that would work, because there are a lot of athletic talents that come from the provinces, right? And like, you're not gonna find boxers in Manila. That doesn't exist, because if you have options to do things like getting punched in the head for money, is really low on like the totem pole of things you're gonna do.
But yeah, you do boxing more for fitness and for recreation, and you're actually trained by, for example, the Elorde system. They have actual pro boxers training you, but you don't actually spar or hit anybody or get hit by anybody.
Well, you can, but then like it's like you'll pay the boxer to let you throw punches at him. I've seen that. I'm just like, how are you gonna know unless you get punched in the face? But I always wondered how that would work out, because maybe people would care more about it if there was school pride on the line, right? So we see how it works with basketball, how it works with volleyball, particularly for women, and in certain socioeconomic levels for soccer, football. If we could do that with boxing, that would be pretty interesting, because it's something about the Ateneo versus La Salle and those sort of rivalries, and
Metran versus San Beda, those things.
Exactly. Yes. If you take it to the NCAA, there's something that just gets people excited. And then that's where I think with boxing, where it lacks the grassroots programs, you could do that with a collegiate system if people were so inclined.
I guess that works in a situation wherein kids are delinquent, they have a loose relationship with their parents. But in an urban setting like we have in Metro Manila, and the kid lives with his or her parents, and they're watching them all the time. They won't allow them to get hurt in a recreational sports setting. But then again, parents let their kids take self-defense classes. They learn, you know, karate, taekwondo, even arnis, where they're hammering each other with sticks. Uh, would that mean the concern is mainly about getting hit in the head a lot in boxing?
In the other sports that you mentioned, you can sort of mitigate the risks. With harness, for instance, it sticks, and you're not actually like stabbing each other and things like that. With taekwondo, in competition, it's almost like tag. Like I believe I saw someone in the Olympics get disqualified for knocking a guy out with a kick, which I
For
thought
hitting him
I
too
thought that
hard.
means,
Yeah, for hitting him
yeah,
too
I thought
hard.
that
Yeah.
means you win. Like, imagine telling someone, yeah, how'd you win your grandpa? How'd you win your gold medal? Some guy kicked me in the face really hard, so he got disqualified. Like, oh, how did you win then? But
Yeah,
with
the
boxing,
shame, the shame of it all.
the idea, we cannot get away from what boxing is. The great shame of boxing and the great appeal of it is it's literally life and death. You're gonna get punched in the head, and there's no way to make that safe. In 100 or so years of organized professional boxing, they've not found a way to actually say, okay, this is how we make it safe. The way to make boxing safe is to ban it, but we're not going to do that because people are going to be fighting for money. They've been fighting for money since since civilization began, and
Yes.
boxing in some form, combat will always be around. That's just human nature. So there's always going to be that issue, but there's something about boxing, the individual being accountable for himself, even if you don't become a world champion. I believe boxing makes you a better person, right? Like I know doctors, lawyers who started out as boxers and got the discipline in their life. Some people go through other things, tough love to become who they are and to self-manifest. And for a lot of people, it's boxing. So you can't tell me boxing isn't the greatest thing for a lot of kids who really need that sort of structure in their life.
And like here in the Philippines, of course, basketball is the number one sport, mainly because you can't do boxing every day. But in the provinces, it's very primal. You don't need equipment. It's like swimming. Basically, it's what God gave you, and that's what you're working with. So for a lot of poor people, they don't need equipment. They can train with barely anything. I mean, we've seen how many documentaries of poor countries in Africa and Latin America where they just literally get sacks, fill them with sand, and use them as punching bags. Well, I guess when you think about it, and the science often speaks for itself too. And there's a German study that said that 10 boxers have been dying a year around the world since the 1900s, except for the 1920s, around the time boxing became legal in the Philippines, where there were 200 boxers who died that decade. So the main concern really is there is no way. They've tried shortening the fights. They've tried adjusting the gloves. There's really no way, Ryan, right?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the 1920s, all the fighters who died from the, in boxing, what comes to mind is the great Dencio Cabanela, the Olongapo kid who died in 1921.
Yeah, he held three weight divisions at the same time, which is crazy.
Yeah, but we've learned certain things. Like, okay, you need to rest after a long fight. You can't just go back into another fight, right after a tough fight. You need to allow your brain to rest from fighting and from training, right? Because let's be honest, a lot of these injuries actually start in sparring, and then you get into a fight where you're dehydrated from trying to make weight and all these other issues and long fights, and you're pushing yourself to the limit. We've learned certain things about boxing, that but sometimes there's nothing you can do. Like I remember Patrick Day, a boxer who I was close with. I
Yes.
knew him from the amateurs. He passed away, I believe, in 2019 after his fight with Charles Conwell, and that just looked like a regular boxing match. There was nothing that suggested in the fight. It wasn't like when Levander Johnson died in his fight with Jesus Chavez. That looked like something where someone was going to get hurt, because Jesus Chavez had power, but not enough to knock you out, but enough to hurt you over a long period of fight. Charles Conwell, the fight with Patrick Day, that didn't look like anything other than a regular boxing match,
Yes.
except Patrick Day went down and he didn't get up. So, there's no way to really eliminate risk from boxing. So anyone who gets in the ring, I don't care, what kind of fighter they are, they're always assuming a risk. So there's always going to be that concern for people. The abolitionists for boxing will always have that great that argument. Because we can say no, boxing isn't dangerous. Of course it is. It has to be a choice that someone makes to get into that ring, right? And an informed choice. Sometimes younger people do get in the ring. Obviously, like we're talking about 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. You have to have adults in terms of mature, responsible officials who are looking out for the boxers, making sure people are not taking undue punishment. But we see this in gyms. I mean,
Yes.
there are some trainers who are pretty crazy. Like I remember the first time I got really badly injured in sparring, and that was the last time I ever boxed again. So sometimes you have these trainers who are not responsible, and they allow people to young people who don't know the risks to get hurt. And that's where I think you need training. You need officials who are educated and responsible.